When my son looked me in the eyes and said, "You're not welcome for Christmas," I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I smiled, stood up from the couch I helped him pay for, and drove myself home. The same hands that once braided his hair now gripped a cold steering wheel, steady and alone. I told myself I was fine. I even laughed a little. But 2 days later, I had 18 missed calls. Not one said, "Sorry." Not one said, "Come home." My name is Serafina Quinn, and what I'm about to share with you isn't just about a broken holiday. It's about a woman who gave everything to her family only to be told she didn't belong. Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say "listening" in the comments or tell me where you're from. I love hearing how far my story reaches. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. If this moment makes you feel anything anger, heartbreak, or even just a flicker of "that's not fair," please consider subscribing to this channel. It helps more than you know. It tells the world that stories like mine deserve to be told. When I pulled into the driveway of Orion and Celestine's home in Forest Heights, the wreath on the door was already glowing, lit by strands of fairy lights that wrapped the porch like a showroom display. The scent of pine hit me before I even knocked. I had called ahead, offered to bring the turkey the way Marcus used to make it, brined in orange peel, rosemary, and peppercorns. It wasn't just a meal, it was a ritual, a bridge from the life before to whatever this fractured family had become. Inside the house was immaculate, curated, like a magazine spread. The silk curtains were drawn back neatly with gold tassels. The hardwood floors gleamed like they'd been polished just minutes ago. I didn't need to guess who paid for most of it. Every inch carried my fingerprint. The mixer on the kitchen counter was the professional grade one Celestine said was too much, but would make her feel like Ina Garten. The leather sectional in the living room. The same one Orion had sent me a link to, asking just until our bonus comes through. Orion wouldn't meet my eyes when he opened the door. His voice was even detached, like someone reading off a script. "Mom, we weren't sure if you were still coming." Celestine appeared behind him dressed in a maroon cashmere sweater, lighting vanilla candles like she was staging a spa. "We thought we'd keep things more intimate this year," she said with that careful lilt she used when she wanted to sound soft but firm. "We've been doing more of Vargo family traditions lately." I caught it. The framing. Not our traditions. Not Marcus's turkey. Not the handmade tree toppers from the years we couldn't afford a new one. The shift was quiet but surgical, and then Orion said it plainly. "We just don't think it's best for you to join us this Christmas." I looked past them into the family room. There it was. The 12-foot tree, decked in gold and champagne ribbons, blinking like something from a catalog. But the old ornament Marcus had carved, the one that used to hang dead center every year, wasn't there. No trace of him. No space for me. Behind the tree on the console table, I noticed the family photo lineup. In each new frame, my image shrunk. In the latest one, I wasn't in it at all. I nodded, smiled. Of course. "Merry Christmas," I said, stepping back. No drama, no scene, just quiet acceptance. My heels clicked against the porch as I walked back to the car. They didn't follow. As I drove away, the roads of Portland glowed with holiday lights, each neighborhood a small shrine to warmth I no longer had access to. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my chest was taut with a quiet ache. I passed the bookstore Marcus and I used to browse after church, the bench where he once kissed my fingers and called them the hardest working hands in the state. I thought of how those same hands had signed every check, swiped every card written, every birthday envelope that helped raise the roof over their heads. Back home in Selwood, the porch bulb flickered, still not fixed. The house felt colder than usual. I'd put off repairing the furnace because the kids' place needed new insulation first. The kitchen counter was bare. No turkey. Just a receipt for the one I never got to roast. I placed my phone screen down on the table. I didn't need to see the silence. I'd already heard it loud and clear. 2 days later, I had 18 missed calls. The morning after the calls, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and a stack of manila folders that had lived untouched in my bottom drawer. I pulled them out one by one: tax returns, bank statements, handwritten notes from contractors, even the scratched-up receipts I kept in an envelope, labeled just in case. I needed to see it, all of it. Not just what they'd taken, but what I'd given. I started labeling each sheet in red ink year by year. Year 1, down payment, closing fees, basic furniture. Year 2, kitchen remodel, granite countertops, that double-door fridge. Celestine swore she'd cook more with, she didn't. Year 3, landscaping for curb appeal, new roofing. Year 4, utility bills just for a couple of months during Orion's job switch. It lasted 9. Year 5, a scheduled $2,900 monthly transfer labeled as mortgage assistance. I'd barely noticed when it switched from manual to automatic. I just kept approving the alerts. The numbers ran like a trail of blood through 5 years of sacrifice. I made tally marks in the margins, every $100 a choice I hadn't made for myself. I remembered the moment I sold Marcus's car. It wasn't just any car. It was his favorite, a 2-door sedan he waxed every Sunday. I sold it to cover the February mortgage when their tax return was delayed. That month, I took the bus to the grocery store, clutching coupons like a college kid. I remembered when I postponed the roof repair on my own house because Celestine's home had to be party-ready for Vargo's board members. When I totaled it all, the number stared back at me like a dare $203,487.36. I blinked, looked again. The sum didn't change. I sat there frozen for a full hour, hands limp in my lap. It wasn't just money, it was time. It was dinners I skipped, friends I ghosted, trips I said no to, all in the name of love. I drove downtown to my old bank. The tellers still remembered me. "Hi, Mrs. Quinn," they said like I hadn't walked out of that chapter 5 years ago. I asked for a full 5-year statement, printed and bound. They gave it to me without a fuss. Back home, I flipped through the transactions and noticed something strange. 3 months ago, the mortgage transfer had quietly increased from $2,700 to $2,900. There was a line revised per recipient request. Celestine's voice echoed in my mind from a month back. "It's just a quick tweak for the tax write-offs, Mom. It'll actually help your bracket." I'd nodded, tired, distracted. That nod became consent. That moment became leverage. On the way home, I passed what used to be a tiny cafe. Marcus and I loved a hole-in-the-wall with no signage, just good scones and jazz in the mornings. Now it was some chain espresso bar filled with laptops and kombucha. I didn't go in. I didn't belong there anymore. I made a detour to Forest Lawn. Marcus's stone was still clean polished. I crouched and whispered, "I let them put a $1 sign on love, but that stops today." My voice didn't shake. It was the first thing that hadn't. Back in my kitchen, I slid all the documents into a fresh manila folder. On the front, I wrote in bold marker, "The truth." I didn't cancel the transfers yet, but the air felt heavier with a decision that was coming soon. The phone rang. Celestine. I watched it blink until it stopped. Then I picked up and said, "Hello." On the morning of the second day after Christmas, I woke up with the faint light of winter slipping through my curtains. I made myself a cup of Earl Grey, letting the steam rise and wrap around my face like a shawl I hadn't worn in years. Outside, the street was wet from overnight rain, the kind that glistened on the rooftops but never froze. My phone was already buzzing when I poured the tea. I turned it face down again. At 9:04 a.m., Celestine called. Her voice was clipped, businesslike. "Mom, could you pick up Cyrus and Evangeline at PDX Alaska Air 447 Baggage Carousel 3? Their Uber fell through." I let the silence sit a moment. Then I said, "Let me check," and ended the call. I didn't go. Instead, I filled the watering can and took it to the back patio. The rosemary bush was yellowing. I hadn't noticed. The bulb in the porch light needed changing. I fetched the ladder. I rearranged the silverware drawer, ran the dryer. I lit a candle that had sat untouched for years and finally flipped the breaker to fix the baseboard heater. By noon, the calls started again. First Celestine, then Evangeline, then Cyrus. A rhythm, one after another. A ring, then a pause, then another, as if they'd planned shifts. I didn't pick up. By 3, I turned the phone over. 18 missed calls, 5 voicemails, 2 texts that were half guilt, half threat. You've made this mess. We're family, and this is what you do to us. You're not well. I sat at the table and stared at them all. Then I stood up and called the bank. Yes, Mrs. Quinn. The woman said warmly, You want to cancel the auto payment to the property in Forest Heights? I do. Immediately. No delays. Of course. I'll send you the confirmation by email. I watched the document land in my inbox, printed it, slid it into the folder labeled The Truth. I ran my hand over the ink like it was a badge of something reclaimed. That night, I pulled out the older receipts, the overlapping statements, the yellowing copies I no longer needed. I fed them into the fireplace one by one. I hadn't used it in years. The crackle echoed through the house like a whisper. The heat reached my fingers. For the first time in a long time, the warmth came from something I built for myself. Later, I noticed 2 voicemails from an unknown number. Curious, I pressed play. Mrs. Quinn, this is Tracy Carter with the Portland Gazette, the first voice said. We're hoping to confirm some details regarding an incident involving your family at PDX. If you could give us a call back, the second was more direct. Hi, this is Isaac from Gazette Media. We've received a statement about an elderly passenger being left stranded. We'd love to hear your side. I sat back, phone still in my hand. So they'd started moving. The game was going public now. I wrote down the names and times, folded the note into the folder. The storm was coming. I looked out the window. The neighbor's Christmas tree blinked from inside their living room, soft, steady light behind glass. I took a sip of tea. The answer to the crossword clue from this morning came to me: postponement. Delayed gratification. Not surrender. Just a matter of timing. I smiled. Timing was something I finally had control over. On the 3rd day after Christmas, around 4:30 in the afternoon, I was out on the back patio watering the camellias when I heard the front gate slam. Then a fist hit the door 3 quick pounds, sharp and impatient. I didn't move. Open up. A voice barked, Cyrus, you can't hide forever. The second voice was shrill, familiar. Evangeline, you think this is funny leaving us at the airport like trash? I walked to the front, slowly wiping my hands on a dish towel. When I opened the door, the 3 of them were lined up like actors in a play that had started before I arrived. Cyrus, still wearing his airport coat, face red and wet with sweat. Evangeline, oversized sunglasses perched in her hair like a crown. Celestine, her lips pressed into a tight line, as if the words she wanted to say were too poisonous to speak aloud in front of witnesses. Cyrus was first through the door. He didn't wait for an invitation. You've embarrassed us, he said, pacing my foyer like it belonged to him. You've humiliated our family in front of neighbors, friends, people who matter. What the hell is wrong with you? Evangeline stood behind him, arms crossed. You left 2 senior citizens alone at an airport like some deranged lunatic. Do you realize how that looks? That's elder abuse. I closed the door behind them, slowly, quietly. Celestine finally stepped forward. Her voice was lower, shakier, but full of calculation. You're sabotaging everything we've built, Mom. Everything Marcus wanted. I looked at them. Really looked. Not one of them asked why I didn't come. Not one mentioned the fact that I was uninvited for Christmas, that they'd chosen to exclude me and expected service in return. They were rewriting the story. You really think canceling a few payments makes you the victim? Evangeline snapped. People will find out what's really going on with you. They already are. Her voice lingered like a match waiting to ignite. I caught the subtext. Something had already been set in motion. Cyrus stepped in next, louder now. You'll be on the front page tomorrow. You want that kind of attention? You want your name dragged through the mud? I didn't reply. I just watched his face, the way his jaw tightened when he thought he'd won. I memorized it. When they finally left, it was with the storm door slamming so hard it rattled the glass. Their footprints left streaks on the welcome mat. I didn't follow them out. Instead, I stood on the porch, arms crossed against the cold. The sun was lowering, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. The street was quiet. My home was still mine. I took a breath and stepped back inside. At my desk, I opened the laptop, searched Portland Gazette editorial board. I clicked through until I found the name Patricia Malone Lifestyle Editor. I didn't recognize her face, but I recognized the names in her LinkedIn connections. Orion was one of them. Of course. They were laying the path before I even saw the signs. I closed the laptop and stood in the middle of my living room. A familiar calm settled over me. Not the silence of being silenced, but the silence before a storm breaks your way. If they wanted to tell a story, I'd tell mine too. Only this time, I'd be the one holding the pen. The knock came just after 8. I was pouring hot water over the coffee grounds, letting the scent fill the kitchen. My porch creaked, then a soft tap on the glass. I opened the door to find Denise, my neighbor, 2 doors down, holding a folded copy of the Portland Gazette with both hands. "I thought you should see it from someone who cares," she said, gently handing it to me. The headline screamed in bold across the top, "Woman abandons elderly couple at airport during holiday storm." Beneath it, a photo of me crop-tight grainy from the company website I hadn't updated in a decade. My face looked older than I remembered. Hollow, unflattering. A woman you'd feel sorry for, but only from a distance. I unfolded the page. The article described me as unwell, financially unstable and estranged from her family for years, liability, and embarrassment. I read the article again. Something didn't sit right. The phrasing was too clean, every sentence threaded with that carefully manufactured tone of concern. The kind of language that didn't come from reporters, it came from crisis PR. I flipped back to the byline, Patricia Malone. I opened my laptop and searched her name, buried 2 jobs back on her LinkedIn PR writer for West Coast Federal, where Cyrus was an executive before he retired early. There it was. This wasn't journalism. This was choreography. I dialed the Gazette's main line, asked to speak with editorial. A woman answered tight and curt. "I'd like to submit a formal response to today's piece," I said. "We don't accept rebuttals to exclusives that have been verified by multiple sources," she replied. I didn't argue. I hung up calm. They weren't interested in truth. They were interested in theater. I clicked over to Facebook. Celestine's page was public. Her latest post, a long dining table glistening with silverware rosemary sprigs tucked into every napkin fold. The caption read, "Ready for Christmas with those who matter most." The comments were a stream of adoration stunning. "You're such a gracious host, wishing you the best." She wasn't hiding. She was thriving. The article hadn't shamed her, it had elevated her. Reinforced the narrative: successful daughter-in-law, heroic caretaker suffering under the weight of a difficult mother figure. I closed the browser. In my filing cabinet, I pulled out the folder labeled The Truth. I added new tabs, made copies of every bank statement, every transfer confirmation, every Venmo screenshot. I pulled photos off her social media, her posing in front of the new kitchen. I funded the Hawaii trip I unknowingly sponsored. I printed the article and highlighted each manipulated phrase. Then I sat back, breathed, and whispered to myself, if they want to play to the audience, then I'll bring the truth to every seat in the house. I spent the next 3 days assembling a war chest. The kitchen table became a battlefield of receipts, screenshots, photo prints, and manila folders. Each folder, a record. Each page, a blade honed with patience. I labeled the big expenses first. Granite countertops, 18x500, roof repair, $11,000, unemployment cover, 14 months, despite promises it would be 1. I didn't stop there. I compiled every invoice, every payment for new appliances, furniture, clothing, even down to the $240 bottle of champagne Celestine bought for her anniversary dinner. the one she toasted under a string of lights I'd paid the electrician to install. I highlighted the matching transactions, stuck sticky notes on every photo she'd posted that corresponded with my withdrawals. Then came the article. I printed 3 copies, one with yellow highlights for misquotes, one with pink for outright falsehoods, and one in blue for anything that could be proven with my documents. When I printed the photo of Celestine at PDX on the day of the so-called abandonment, I caught something new. She was standing in the priority check-in lane, VIP section, smiling at her phone. Behind her, a man in uniform wheeled 2 carry-ons. The timestamp was the exact hour she claimed I'd left them stranded. I checked the weather for that day, 52 degrees, no wind, dry pavement. Not exactly a storm. I printed both. Paper clipped them together. As I worked, I came across a Facebook event Celestine had created accidentally public. Christmas dinner at the Vargo Residence 15 RSVPs. I knew the names: business owners, HOA members, 1 local councilman, all polished, well-connected, image-conscious. I smiled, not spitefully, strategically. I created 15 folders, each identical. Each one included bank statements, photos, social media posts, the Gazette article. A note from me, handwritten. You may have seen a version of my story. Here's the full one. At the print shop, I ran into Kayla, the owner. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. Serafina Quinn. She said, "I haven't seen you since Marcus's service." We talked for a few minutes. She watched me count copies. "This for business?" she asked. "For truth," I said. She looked at the article sitting by the copier. Her expression tightened. "If you ever need someone to say who you really are, I will." She didn't owe me that, but she offered it anyway. It reminded me paper tells part of the story, but people remember more. On Christmas Eve night, I dressed deliberately. A black wool dress Marcus had bought me the last year he was alive. High neckline, long sleeves, plain but elegant. Something that whispered dignity, not grief. At 6:30 p.m., I zipped the folders into a small black suitcase and stood in the doorway. The folded copy of the Gazette still lay on the hall table, opened to the article, my face staring back. I didn't flinch. The snow hadn't come. Just a crisp chill in the air. As I stepped outside, the streetlights blinked on one by one. It was time. I arrived at the Vargo residence at 6:55 p.m. From the sidewalk, I could see the lights glowing golden through the bay window, soft jazz floating out the slightly ajar door, and the flicker of candles bouncing off polished wine glasses. Celestine always loved to perform wealth, an artist of staged abundance. I didn't knock. She once told me smugly that in Forest Heights, people don't lock their doors. It's a safe neighborhood, she'd said, proud of what that said about her status. So I turned the handle and stepped inside. The scent of roasted rosemary chicken hit me first. Laughter, silver clinking against porcelain, the sound of someone pouring wine, all of it collided with me like a wave I'd once been part of, but now stood outside of. 15 people sat around the table. A curated mix. Cyrus's retired business friends, Evangeline's avant-garde gallery, crowd 2 HOA members, each one carefully chosen, each one carefully deceived. I didn't say a word as I wheeled my small black suitcase through the room and parked it by the buffet. The table quieted. Conversations dropped. Forks paused mid-air. I saw Celestine's face change, first curiosity, then calculation, then the faint edge of fear. Orion's lips parted, but no words came. Cyrus's brow furrowed like someone watching a woman they thought had died stand up at her own memorial. I unzipped the suitcase, pulled out the 15 folders, and began placing them one by one in front of each guest. Neat, intentional, no drama, just the truth delivered like a summons. I understand you've been invited tonight to celebrate the accomplishments of a family, I said, voice steady. I simply thought you should also know who paid for those accomplishments. No one interrupted. Celestine opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her carefully constructed scene was frozen in amber, every eye now on me. A woman near the end of the table, Georgia, a local journalist who wrote lifestyle pieces for a neighborhood paper, flipped through her folder. She stopped at the photo of the kitchen. "This remodel," she said. "You paid for this?" I nodded. "The counters, the appliances, even the lighting. You'll find the matching transfers and receipts marked in red." Another guest turned a page, then another. Soon, the only sound was paper turning. I stepped to the center of the table and unfolded a printout of the Portland Gazette article. I placed it face up, spun it toward them, so they could all see my face on the front page. I read aloud, "I love my mother-in-law, but her instability has become dangerous." My eyes stayed on Celestine. "Do you still love your mother-in-law, Celestine?" She stood abruptly, knocking her chair slightly out of place. "You have no right to crash our dinner like this." "I'm not crashing," I said softly. "I'm returning everyone to their rightful role in this little play." Then came the murmurs, quiet at first, then louder. "Celestine, is this the tuition statement for your daughter, Cyrus? You told me you were self-funded. Why are there transfers from your mother, Evangeline?" Stood voice trembling. "This is Christmas. Can we please not do this tonight?" "Forgiveness," I said, "is not a magic trick to erase discomfort. It's earned, and it starts with truth." Then unexpectedly, Orion spoke. His voice cut through the room, low but clear. I didn't know it had gone this far. I looked at him, my son. "You didn't want to know." He didn't argue, just lowered his head. That moment, the weight shifted. For years, I had been the invisible line under their signatures, the fallback fund, the unwanted conscience. Now I was something else entirely, a mirror they couldn't look away from. I gathered the article, zipped the suitcase, and turned toward the door. Behind me, the room stirred. Chairs scraped, voices rose. The party fractured like glass under heat. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need vindication. I needed truth to be seen. And tonight it was. 3 months later, a letter arrived by certified mail. Notice of default. The house on Forest Heights was going under. I wasn't surprised. Removed the scaffolding of my support and the structure crumbled fast. 3 months without my $2,900. 3 months of unpaid mortgages. 3 months of reality catching up. I ignored the next few calls. Celestine left voicemails, 3 of them. Apologies wrapped in justifications, pleas stitched with self-pity. I deleted them all without listening past the first sentence. Then one March afternoon, Orion stood on my porch. He looked smaller, paler, like a man who'd been holding his breath for months and just now exhaled. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said. "Only to say I'm sorry." He didn't deflect, didn't defend. He just spoke. I let him. For the first time in years, I listened without interrupting. He told me Celestine had left for New York. Her parents, once so generous with their judgment, had cut as well. He was alone now, for the first time, truly alone. "So what now?" I asked. "You want me to come back and fix it all again?" He shook his head. "No. I just wanted to tell you, I know I failed you." I studied his face, the boy I raised, now a man, with the dust of shame finally settling on his shoulders. "You never lost your mother," I said. "You just let other people borrow her for too long." He cried then. Not theatrically, just the silent, shuddering kind of crying men do when they're out of excuses. I didn't hug him. I didn't whisper comfort. But I went into the kitchen and poured 2 cups of tea. One for him, one for me. We drank in silence, but it wasn't the silence that used to fill the air between us like fog. It was clean, unburdened. Later that evening, I sat in the kitchen alone. The roof had been repaired last month. The porch lights worked again. The walls, once water-stained from a leak I'd ignored too long, had been painted a soft sage green. On the fridge next to an old photo of Marcus, I'd pinned a newer one, me, Aunt Mirabelle, and her grandkids planting spring tulips. My phone buzzed. A message from Mirabelle. "The kids want their chocolate egg hunt. They asked if you'd come." I replied, "Wouldn't miss it," bringing Marcus's cherry pie. I walked out to the porch wrapped in my cardigan tee, still warm in my hands. I wasn't the woman I'd been last Christmas, not the mother who begged for a place at the table, not the financier of someone else's fantasy. I was a woman who knew her worth now, and who understood that a family, when stripped of truth, is just a nameplate on a locked door. But when truth lives there too, then it can be home.